Hello there everybody, and welcome to the Canadian Movie Buff Review's 10th anniversary extraordinaire. 10 years and 13 days ago today, I uploaded the first episode of my flagship series. Can you believe it's already been an entire decade since I've started my YouTube career? Where does the time go? In this video, I'll be talking about the origins of Canadian Movie Buff Reviews, some of the inspiration behind it, how I got started, the format of the show itself, explaining the ratings, discussing some of the more recent history, and what the future of the show may look like. And before we get too deep into the video, I just want to say that there's not going to be a whole lot of visuals. What's on screen now is more or less what you get. So if you just want to minimize the tab, or just have this on in the background, that's perfectly fine. Treat this more like a podcast than a video, okay? Okay. To start this story off properly, we need to go all the way back to the early to mid 2010s, and talk about what kind of YouTube content I was watching back in the day. See, YouTube is all about niches, and one niche that I had found myself on was the movie review side of YouTube, or ReviewTube, as I'll call it for the sake of this video. I was subscribed to a number of different YouTube reviewers because I liked hearing different opinions about different movies and TV shows, seeing what everybody highlighted in their videos, what they agreed or disagreed on. But one channel that really caught my eye and took up probably the most amount of my YouTube watch time was Screen Junkies. These days, they're mostly known as the Honest Trailers channel, but for a good run of the 2010s, they had a show where they would host a panel consisting of internet personalities who covered movies. Whether they were YouTubers or hosts of a movie-related channel or ran movie-related websites, Screen Junkies would gather them for a panel and they would discuss a topic. One yearly tradition that I looked forward to was their summer box office prediction video. In April, they would gather a trio of guests and they would make a list where they would predict the top 10 highest grossing movies at the domestic box office of the summer season. In hindsight, the show was kind of a testing grounds for another program they hosted called Movie Fights. On that program, they would have a panel of guests debate various topics surrounding movies, and the winner would even get a makeshift belt to take home. They've actually brought back Movie Fights recently, and longtime fans of the channel will recognize some familiar faces. Of course, the channel started losing steam when Andy Sigmore got accused of sexual harassment and then Dan Murrow left the company to do his own thing. But for a good number of years, Screen Junkies was kind of the epicenter of ReviewTube. If you had a decent-sized following within the realm of online movie criticism, you could show up on an episode of their main show or on Movie Fights. As I mentioned, reviewers was what I mostly watch on YouTube. That and Smosh Games, and Scene Enters. So seeing these personalities appear on Screen Junkies or collaborate on each other's videos was a big deal. John Flickinger, the Flick Pick, shared an old photo of himself eating pizza with Jeremy Jahns, Chris Stuckman, and the Schmoes guys, Christian Harloff and Mark Ellis. It was a photo they had initially taken back in 2012, and they were mimicking the post-credits scene from The Avengers, where they're eating shawarma. And seeing that photo again was like a flashbang of nostalgia. I actually remember seeing that photo when it first dropped, and to me, that was as exciting as seeing that pan-around shot of the original 6 Avengers for the first time. Like, that was a cultural milestone. However, something else that I noticed was how centralized YouTube as a platform was becoming, or at least it felt like it was becoming a more centralized platform. The broadcast yourself era of YouTube was ending, and the overly corporatized version that we know of today was starting to take form. Not to mention, it seemed as if all prominent channels were being scooped up by multi-channel networks or digital media companies. Basically, the consensus across the board was, if you're not signed on to one of these networks or companies, you're a nobody. Now, I had no serious aspirations to be a YouTuber at the time, but I had strongly considered using it as a platform to just share my opinions about movies, and whether or not the channel did well would be a happy byproduct. The direction that YouTube was heading in, and the fact that ReviewTube was becoming this clique, was part of what discouraged me from making videos. The main reason though was that I didn't have a good quality camera or microphone. Again, this was the mid-2010s. If you weren't coming onto the platform with the highest quality camera, the best microphones, and the slickest editing this side of the San Andreas fault line, you were better off not trying at all. That all changed though when I got introduced to an individual named Doug Walker. One channel I used to watch quite a bit back in the day was CinemaSins. This was back in the day when CinemaSins was pointing out legitimate plot holes and continuity errors, and not just making up stuff just to make their videos 20 minutes long. And on his video of the Jim Carrey Grinch movie, This guy with a cap, a red tie, and a sports jacket interrupted the video and introduced himself as the Nostalgia Critic. Out of curiosity, I checked out where he hosted his videos, Channel Awesome, and I admit I liked what I saw. That being said, I wound up watching a lot of his older content, and I was struck by how amateur it looked. The audio was terrible, the video quality maxed out at 480p, but the videos were entertaining. In that moment, that's when I knew that I could do it. It didn't matter what gear I had, so long as I was able to be entertaining and or insightful. After a while, I bought myself a Blue Yeti microphone, which I still use to this day, and borrowed the family camcorder. In high school, I was taking a class called Film Studies, where we learned how to use Adobe Premiere Pro. My understanding of Premiere Pro was basic, but I assume a lot of YouTubers had a very basic understanding of editing when they first joined the platform. There was only really one major hurdle I had to get over before I officially started my YouTube career, and that was coming up with a name. Here's the thing, it was late 2015, early 2016 when I put some serious thought into starting a YouTube movie review channel, so I knew two things off the bat. I was jumping into the game quite late in terms of what I had for audio-video quality, and I needed a gimmicky name. Around this time, the age of angry man-children yelling obscenities at a bad movie was long passé. It was already seen as a relic at the time. It was no longer trendy to call yourself the angry nerd and have a magic weapon to fight bad movies with in your videos. Still, I knew that if I wanted to draw attention to my videos, I couldn't just have movie title, movie review, and have my channel name be my name. The only two people who could get away with that were Jeremy Johns and Chris Stuckman. I initially came up with Canadian Movie Nerd and Canadian Movie Geek, but those were taken. Ultimately, I decided on Canadian Movie Buff Reviews. Now, for a brief moment, I did think about having an ellipses instead of an exclamation mark, thinking it would be nice to add a bit of showmanship to the title. You know, almost like a drum roll. Canadian Movie Buff Reviews... Movie! I went with the exclamation mark because I thought it would be a good way to indicate that it was part of a collection. After coming up with a name, I had to pick which movie to kick off the show with. At the time, the first Deadpool movie had been in theaters for a month, so I looked for a different movie to pick up as my series premiere. That movie wound up being 10 Cloverfield Lane. I went out to see it, came back and wrote the review, filmed it using the camcorder and the microphone using a corner of my parents' basement that I felt worked enough as the setting, and that's how the show was born. Another thing I understood when making this show was that I had to make it unique. I couldn't just turn on the camera and blather on about what I liked or didn't like about the movie for a few minutes. I crafted up an intro, an outro, and then divided the review itself into segments. These being First Impression, where I give some brief preconceptions and initial thoughts about the movie, the Pros, where I highlighted what I liked, the Cons, where I talked about what I didn't like, and Final Verdict, where I'd give it a final rating. The reason why I had sections dedicated to talking about both the positive and the negatives of a movie was to keep me as objective as possible. Every bad movie has at least one redeeming quality, and every good movie has one thing that doesn't quite work. I've since combined the two segments into one, but we'll talk about that later. Another way I tried making my show stand out was I didn't use a traditional rating system. Whereas most reviewers would give it a grade rating, or maybe a number of stars, or maybe a rating out of 5 or 10. I wanted something that had a bit more personality to it. Something more flashy, that could be quoted amongst viewers. I made a video a few years ago where I talked about and explained my ratings, but if that video isn't deleted already, it will soon be deleted. Mostly because it promotes a Patreon account that I've long since gotten rid of. So I'll break down the ratings for you right here, right now. First off, we're going to start with the lowest of the low, Skip It. This is the lowest rating. A movie that gets this rating, I have virtually nothing positive to say about the movie. I'm like really scraping the bottom of the barrel to say something nice. A Skip It rating is pretty self-explanatory. Don't watch any movie that has this rating. Wait for Netflix. This rating was for movies that had a couple things going for it, but weren't worth paying any sort of money for it. I've since ratified this to be wait for streaming, since Netflix is now just one of the many platforms that a movie could be on these days. Believe it or not, there was a time when Netflix was synonymous with streaming service, instead of the plethora of options we have nowadays. Imagine that. A single streaming service that has all the movies and TV shows you could possibly want to watch. See it at the cheap seats. Movies that got this rating were worth paying money to see, just not full price. If you live in a large enough city, there's at least one movie theater that plays movies for about $5 a pop. They're more commonly known as second-run theaters. What I'm saying with this rating is, check the movie out, but don't rush out to see it. Wait until there's like a discount day, or wait for it to go to a second-run theater. Worth seeing in theaters. This is for movies that are actually quite good. Worth paying the stupidly expensive price for a ticket. Sometimes I'll add the IMAX banner in the rating if I thought it was worth the extra few dollars to see it in that format. These are the 7 out of 10 movies. Like, not fantastic, but pretty good. Multiple viewings at the theater or on Blu-ray. Movies that get this rating are not only great, but they're worth paying to see over and over again. Whether this is going out more than once to see it in a theater or getting on home media to watch it whenever you feel like it. If this rating sounds familiar, I'll explain it in a moment. And the final rating, and the rating that is the most highest honor I can bestow upon a movie, is Total Incrediblast. This was reserved for the best of the best. Movies that I could not recommend enough. Either they were insanely rewatchable, masterfully made, or just plain amazing movies. There are technically 2 more ratings, but I have used them very sparingly. Quarantine. So far, I've only used it on 2 movies. The Snowman, starring Michael Fassbender, and the 2018 Robin Hood movie starring Taron Egerton and Jamie Foxx. These movies were awful. They weren't just bad, they were so wretchedly terrible that nobody should go near them. They should be, well, placed in quarantine. Like, away from the general public. Just don't even acknowledge it exists. And then there's Critics' Delight. I think I've only used this once, and it was for the 1988 anime film Akira. I remember watching this movie and not really loving it. I mean, I certainly appreciated the artistic merit it had and what it brought to the pop culture table, but I just didn't really click with it. So I made this rating up as a way of saying, I didn't love this movie, but I respect it. Actually, I just checked. I used it again for The Goldfinch, starring Enzo Elgert. Don't know why I gave it that rating. That movie got mostly negative reviews from critics, so not really a critic's delight there. Now, something I should mention is that I got the idea of making up my own ratings from Jeremy Johns, as he was the only reviewer that I watched who didn't use grades or numbers. When I first started the show, I was pretty good at getting them out within the first few days of a movie's release, so I cultivated my ratings accordingly. My thinking was that I would get the bulk of the viewership during those initial first few days, so if I based the rating system around whether a movie was worth seeing in theaters or not, that would help viewers determine whether it was worth their time, or if they should wait. My second highest rating, having Blu-ray being mentioned, would draw some comparisons to Jeremy Johns, but I admit, I think where I really kind of tried to ride his coattails was by making up my own phrase for the highest rating. Jeremy Johns has a word that he's coined, awesome-tacular, a combination of awesome and spectacular. It was actually a pretty creative idea, if I may say so myself. I thought it would be neat to do something similar, and so I came up with Total Incrediblast, combining the phrase a total blast with incredible. I even included a little applause as part of the rating, so as if I wasn't ripping off the guy enough. Still, I'm proud of their rating system, and I think they all do a good job of reflecting my personal emotions towards a movie. My YouTube career was now off to the races. I was putting out videos on a consistent basis, even if they were a bit later than I would preferred. They didn't always come out on time, and for a while I made an update video almost as frequently as I released a new episode. However, the channel initially wasn't just a place for Canadian movie buff reviews. I had called it Peak Summon Productions. The idea going forward was that I could use it as a place to upload all my future projects, be it short films or edits or other review shows. In fact, I had a series called Found on Netflix, which would review movies and TV shows found exclusively on Netflix. That show quickly died after I realized just how monumental a task it would be to review every single Netflix original project. Then I changed it to James F. Ewart, my full name and middle initial, and I just treated it as my default YouTube channel. In fact, the most viewed video I had for a while was an April Fool's Day gag I had made. It was called Justice League is Better Than the Snyder Cut, and it was this complete shitpost of a video. Yet somehow it managed to garner over 50,000 views. I've since made it private and will likely delete it, but still, it was nice to have that taste of internet virality. Now, remember earlier when I mentioned that discovering Doug Walker and his early Nostalgia Critic episodes encouraged me to just start my YouTube channel? Well, I may have took a bit more inspiration as well. I was still in the mindset that I had to join a network or company or website to be able to stand a chance in this era of ReviewTube. So I started making my videos in a fashion that I thought would act as a good resume for in case they opened up Channel Awesome to take new contributors. That meant including skits of my videos, sometimes going over the top in my reactions, and adding a dash of fast-talking, snarky behavior. I eventually donned a flannel shirt as part of the costume, which I still use to this day. Really going all in on the gimmick. I say all this because this is what led to a phenomenon that has plagued my channel almost since the very beginning. Delays. Instead of pumping out a review in time for the movie's initial week, I was now doing it months later. And a big reason why was down to my aspirations for the show itself. Like many of the Channel Awesome crowd, I started including characters and lore. I even wrote up scripts for the episode to basically mimic the plot of the movie that I had just saw and was going to review. It was going to be this huge cinematic universe where they would have all these different characters and events, and they would be callbacks to said characters and events. Of course, that never happened. And for the bulk of the summer of 2017, I was more focused on creating scripts and crafting the lore of my review show than actually making new episodes. In hindsight, I should have realized that it was never going to work, scrap the whole thing, and just focus on making the best reviews that I could. I still did that, but at the same time, I kept writing lore in hopes that maybe they would find their way onto the show. There have been some episodes where I've made the skits work. The intro to Aquaman was to highlight it being my 100th episode and a quick gag that sets the video up. I have done more elaborate skits, but they've mostly been scrubbed from the channel. And let me tell you, they are not worth hunting down or preserving, because they are terrible. These videos would have sucked if they were made in 2008, and they came out in 2018. My skits made the Channel Awesome anniversary movies look like the Dark Knight trilogy by comparison. There are some videos where the skits have remained because they were just too integrated into the plot and pacing of the review itself, and cutting them out would have made the video feel very weird and choppy. Still, I've pretty much abandoned the whole concept of including skits and lore in Canadian movie buff reviews. I have thought about bringing it back for like a special episode, like episode 175 or 200 or even the series finale, or even a season finale. The character I've used the most is called the Gunslinger, basically a ripoff of Roland from The Dark Tower. He was going to be this wandering badass who fights bad guys from Stephen King novels, since he was introduced in the Dark Tower review and used again in the review of the first It movie. His last appearance was in the intro of the Dr. Sleep review, and that is currently his only appearance that is still available for public viewing. My ideas were pretty ambitious. It was going to be like this whole multiverse where everybody is just a different variant of me. Like one's a version of Agent K from Blade Runner 2049, another's are just a ripoff of John Wick. I remember there was a 3-episode arc, which got down to 2, that involved time travel, a map, and this made-up object that was called the MacGuffin. It was the sort of deconstructive meta-humor that was the style at the time. Hey, we're going to call the literary device that moves the plot forward the literary device that moves the plot forward. Get it? Are we funny yet? Again, those skits are pretty much gone, but I keep meaning to do a more proper adaptation of that storyline. The only 2 videos I haven't been able to completely do away with the skits are Ghost in the Shell and Blade Runner 2049, and they're overtly connected. For some reason though, I can't quite let go of this idea that I have. I still want to make this weird cinematic universe thing work. I might bring it back as a complete shitpost. Like I review a movie that involves the multiverse and there's a quick scene with a bunch of characters that I've played coming back for revenge. Or maybe for the Mortal Kombat movie, I'll have a running gag where I try and play the movie using a PlayStation controller. Nothing too crazy, just a bit of fun to end a season or for a special episode. I might also bring back skits just because I have fun making them, but also because they've helped me develop my skills as a filmmaker. Don't take this as a promise, or even a threat, of anything to come. I'm not saying that there's a script for a Canadian movie buff movie out there somewhere. What I am saying is that I might do something similar to what I did with my videos on Aquaman, or The Irishman, or something like Blade Runner 2049, or Avengers Infinity War. Initially, I had a tradition where every 25 episodes, I would do a spoiler review. But now I do spoiler reviews for every single episode, so that's kind of fallen by the wayside. I have to work a little bit harder to make every 25th episode feel special. As I said earlier, I struggled quite a bit with getting videos out in a timely manner. and I was at school at the time, in university. Which is why you can find a good number of episodes from seasons 1 and 2 taking place in my dorm room. I eventually got a green screen in 2018, and I've used that ever since, albeit not quite knowing how to key things properly. Intentionally or not, I had made this pattern of each season running from April of one year and then to March of the following year. It wasn't the most punctual, but keeping a rhythm of one season per year was a good habit. When season 4 began, in April of 2019, I was ready to make it my biggest and best season. Things were going well. I was mastering my skills in front of and behind the camera, and I pressed onwards with excitement of what awaited me afterwards. Season 5 would be even better, as a number of movies were celebrating significant anniversaries in 2020. Now, hearing that year, you can probably guess what happened next. COVID came along and slammed the brakes. I felt emotionally drained. I felt trapped in my house, and I didn't have a lot of drive to complete Season 4 because, well, what was I going to fill Season 5 with? Things didn't start turning around for the better until 2022, and even then I was still behind on finishing Season 4. I won't go into the long and short of it, but I finally managed to put out episode 150, the Season 4 finale, in May of 2023. 4 years after that season had started, I had finally finished it. Now there's the question of, what's next? I was out of school, had no serious obligations other than work. My second channel, Extra Fraser, was doing better than my main one, and I had a crazy long backlog of movies to cover, a list that was growing with each passing week. For a good while, I thought about just ending things with that aforementioned episode. It's not just my personal favorite episode of the show, it's one of the best videos I've ever made for YouTube. My backlog was already so extensive at the time that I didn't really feel the desire to continue. I was more than happy to let it end there and have Canadian movie buff reviews be this weirdly wonderful experiment. Then I uploaded the Season 5 premiere in November of 2024, and the rest is history. I'm just going to say this right out of the gate. My show hasn't aged particularly well. There's a lot of bad green screen, atrocious audio mixing. I don't think I started releasing videos in higher resolution than 480p until my 15th episode. It was this plucky review show that I was doing my best to make work, even if I had no idea what I was doing. I used MS Paint to craft my thumbnails. I was using an Acer laptop to edit, which has now become no more than a piece of furniture. I didn't even get Photoshop until 2017, and I didn't get a desktop computer until 2019. It has gotten way better. In fact, if I had started the show in 2016 with the knowledge and tools that I have now, it would be in a much better place. That being said, part of what's made me the experienced editor and producer that I am today is because of that decade of struggle. If I were to measure Canadian movie buff reviews in terms of viewership and subscribers, it would be a failure. Heck, the most viewed video I had up for a while was this complete low-effort, low-quality joke that poked fun of the Justice League movie. Like, really? That's the video that ended up taking off? But if I had to measure Canadian movie buff reviews in terms of what I learned, then it was a success. Every time I ran into an issue while editing, I would look up the solution online, and then incorporate it into the video, and that was another piece of knowledge I had gained as an editor. Looking at my most recent videos versus what I put out a decade ago isn't just night and day. It's like two completely different worlds. That's part of the reason why I do plan to keep going, and at least finish this season. Right now, the most recent episode I have is the one on The Way Back, starring Ben Affleck. I won't get into details about what's coming down the pipeline, but I do know that I have a definitive stopping point, one that I've settled on ages ago. I'm sorry if this disappoints anyone, but Sinners, Weapons, Superman, and F1 are among the many titles that will not be getting episodes of Canadian movie buff reviews. I'm also thinking about changing up the format of the show again. I've already done it fairly recently with the season where I've combined the pros and the cons section into one, and every video is now a spoiler review, but I might change things again. I know that I plan to get as far as episode 245, the season 6 finale, but if that doesn't turn out to be the end of the series, then seasons 7 and 8 will be radically different. For one, I will retire the traditional episode format and just make specials. Just really extensive videos that are deep dives into a movie or a group of movies. Then again, I might make episode 215 the series finale. Or maybe that whole it takes 10 years to become an overnight success thing will kick in. You never know. I will also say that some of the titles that I chose as episodes are being readjusted to be videos for Extra Fraser, so don't worry, I'll always be around to talk about movies. The end goal, though, is to have Canadian movie buff reviews over and done with before we get too late into 2026. It's been fun making these videos, but it's been a whole decade. I'm older now, and I need to actively get on with making a career in the film industry, or just a career in general. Whether that's being part of a crew or making my own stuff. It's time I accept that this show has had its time in the sun. It was cool to do this and mess around when I was 18 going on 19. You can do the math to figure out how old I am now. But it's a chapter of my life that I need to put behind me. I'll make another video in the near future once I have things a bit more solidified. But for the time being, thank you so much for watching my videos over the years. If this is your first time hearing about the show, please feel free to binge watch all my old episodes, if not to appreciate just how much my craft has improved over the years. And if you've been around for a while, thank you again for sticking around through all the delays and pushbacks and whatnot. Have a blessed day, and hopefully, the next 10 years are good to you. Goodbye for now.